Utah time. So let's go ahead and get started. Thank you to everyone for being here at this Mormons Building Bridges online gathering. The purpose of these gatherings is for us to hear examples of how individuals are making their wards and stakes places where LGBT people can thrive. And tonight, we get the blessing of hearing from a couple transgender members sharing things that members and or local leaders in their area have done, some of them good and some of them bad, and what they hope that we can do so that all of us can learn how to make our wards and stakes better, things that we can do in our areas. So we're going to start out with a 5-minute introduction from each of our wonderful speakers. We have Valerie Green and Kris, Irvin. So we'll get a little introduction, and then they'll take turns sharing some of their experiences after that. And then we may have a couple others share if they come on, and then at the end we'll open up for questions. So if anyone wants to type a question, there's a little button that says chat at the bottom, and you can type your question, and we'll get to that at the end. Or if you'd like to just throw it out there after we're done sharing, you can do that as well. And you can direct your question to a specific person or to anybody. And we're getting a little bit of feedback, so I'm going to mute everybody who's not speaking, and then we'll unmute when we get to the question point. All right. So Valerie, if you wouldn't mind going ahead and introducing yourself.
Okay, I am Valerie Green. I live in St. Louis, Missouri. We're going to give you a little bit of background from me so you have some understanding of my perspective and where it comes from. I have a very similar story to many transgender people. I've known something was different about me since the time I was 4 years old. I didn't have the conceptual framework or the words or anything to explain what was going on, but I just knew that I should be a girl. And so I went through the typical childhood of a transgender person, especially within the Mormon environment, of living with shame and guilt and what's wrong with me and hoping it'll go away and praying for it to disappear. And of course, none of those things actually work. It grows and grows over time. And then, I didn't even know I could even transition from male to female until the late 70s when I first encountered Dr. Renee Richards, who was a tennis player, and I was an avid tennis player. And I discovered that you can actually transition from male to female. I was like, oh my gosh, that's became my dream. But it was a dream that I just stuffed away and hid for as long as I possibly could. Went through all the normal young male Mormon things, including getting married. I'm a father of 5 children and grandfather of 6 children. My wife, who I was married to for 34 years, I'm widowed. She passed away about 3 years ago. She was aware that I was transgender because I told her about 12 years into our marriage. So she knew for about 20 of the years that we were married, but at the time I limited it to cross-dressing and was not expecting to ever actually be able to transition to full-time. But after she passed away, I told my kids, I said, look, this is the way I'm going to be in my home and you'll have to deal with it. And even as early as February of 2018, I thought I would continue to live a dual life as female and male in different environments. But it didn't take another 4 months after that when I finally decided it was time to fully transition. And so there's stories about transition. We won't get into all the details. There's a story you can read about that on Latter-Gay Stories. That there's an interview there that talks about that. And that's far more than we need here for today. But we'll just say that I finally transitioned at church in August of 2018, 4 months ahead of schedule. and then fully socially transitioned on January 1st, 2019. So this is just after my first full year of transition. I've done all the stuff. I've had my name changed. I've done all the legal things, gender markers and passports and driver's licenses, etc. So it's been an interesting time for me. It's been an absolutely fabulous year. To give you some perspective with respect to the church, when I transitioned, I walked in and I told my bishop, this is what's happening. Will I still be welcome here? And that's all that I said to him to start. And of course, he had questions, and he was a brand new bishop. I'm like, guess what I've got for you, brand new bishop? Now I'd known him for years. He'd just recently been called. And we had a long discussion about educating him. What does it mean for someone to be transgender? What was my life like? What was it like with my wife, etc. And we finished up, and he got to the end, and he goes, well, I don't see any issues. I said, well, somebody will. Don't worry about that. So anyway, so I eventually spoke to the stake president. The stake president had a similar discussion with me. He was very respectful. But then he handed me some restrictions. So these are the restrictions that I have within the church. They are that I cannot hold a calling. I cannot speak in sacrament. I cannot pray for the voice for a group. So I can't say prayers in Sunday school or any prayers in sacrament meeting. I have to have a bathroom cleared at church before I can use it. I can use the correct one for my gender, but I am not allowed to use it unless I have it cleared out. And then the worst one that I didn't like was I'm not allowed to attend either priesthood or relief society, as long as I am appear to be female. Interestingly, it was appearance that was based upon, and when these restrictions were placed, it was based on my appearance. And at the time, he looked at me and he goes, well, I see pierced ears and long nails with polish, and that was enough to trigger the restrictions immediately, which is why I transitioned in August rather than January at church. I said, well, if they're going to come on now, I'm transitioning now at church, and so I did. Well, what I thought was funny was I looked exactly that same way for the 2 years prior as I taught the senior youth Sunday school. There was no difference, but once I told them, then it made a difference what I looked like. Things that I am allowed to do that some of which surprised me, discussion in Sunday school, which is not unusual. I am allowed to attend ward functions, and I am actually surprisingly allowed to partake of the sacrament. I didn't think that would actually happen. And although I've not been told I can't have a temple recommend, I was not asked for my current one at the time, but I would probably never go ask for one again because I don't expect to ever be able to attend the temple again. So I've not even bothered trying to go and request one. So that is a little bit of me. I am still active at church as much as I possibly can be, and we'll discuss a little bit later some of the things that have happened within my ward that have occurred to make me feel as included as possible. And okay, so that's for me. So we'll switch on to Kris and hear Kris's story.
Well, Valerie said like half of my story.
It's still your story.
Just switched with gender, so that was funny. Thanks for stealing my talk there, Valerie. Okay, so hi, I'm Kris. I live in Utah. I live in Bluffdale. I am married to, so I'm born female. I'm married to my husband of 13 years, and we have an almost 12-year-old son. And yeah, my story is pretty similar to Valerie's in a lot of ways. I grew up knowing that there was something about me that was off. I just never liked the girl stuff. I'm sure my mom was unprepared to have a little girl who was actually a little boy inside. So she kind of didn't handle it very well when I wanted to do more, tomboy type things. So I kind of learned at an early age to not talk about it. I would stay over on the weekends with my grandma, and half the time I would ask her to call me by a boy's name every weekend. And my grandma's awesome. She didn't even bat an eyelash. I remember when I was like 8 or 9, the family proclamation came out. And up until then, I kind of just figured that my spirit was a boy and it just got lost on the way to the body it was supposed to be going to. I don't know, kid logic. But I said this to a primary teacher and she told me, well, that's not possible. And so I remember thinking, oh, so then why am I like this? Why do I feel this way? So I didn't say anything. And I grew up and went to Young Women's and felt totally alone and isolated and really not one of the group. I went to several different wards. We moved quite a lot. We lived in Florida. We lived in several wards in Utah. And every time there would be activities that were like, design your wedding dress or, learn to cook. I can't remember. It's been a long time. But every time it was like, oh, just isn't who I am. And the boys would be out scouting and, I desperately wanted to be a Boy Scout. And now I could be. Dang it. But anyway, I just felt very alone and weird and like a freak. And didn't know what the word was for what I was like. And I decided when I was 19 that I wanted the Mormon fairy tale. I wanted to get married in the temple and have, 27 babies and sing primary songs to them every night. And so my husband and I got married and we had our son Toby, and found out that we could only have one or I would die. And I was like, I can take those odds. And my husband's like, yeah, no, we're done. And then I just tried really hard to be as feminine as possible. And I kind of went the really conservative Christian submissive wife route. Fascinating Womanhood, if you've heard of that. It's terrible. My grandma saw me reading it and yelled at me because it's not very progressive. And I was miserable. I was depressed, and I've always struggled with depression and anxiety, but it was really, really bad. In 2013, I started school at BYU to get my bachelor's degree in English, sorry. And in 2015, so I started at BYU, and I wanted to meet more students at BYU, even though, I live in Bluffdale, so it's kind of a drive. So the way I figured I could meet people was online. So I started going on Tumblr and met a whole bunch of BYU students. And while I'm on Tumblr, I'm seeing all these discussions about queer stuff and queer rights and transgender people and female to male transgender people. And I remember reading about what that meant, and everything just clicked. And it was like, oh my gosh, that's who I am. This is why I've always felt this way. Suddenly everything makes so much sense. So I came out on October 11th, 2015. And then the exclusion policy came out. And it was interesting timing because the policy of exclusion came out 2 months before my son Toby was due to turn 8. And so it was like, now what? Does he not get to be baptized? Where do we go from here? And my bishop, who was also a brand new bishop and inexperienced, I guess, he was like, no, you're fine. He can be baptized. So Toby decided he wanted to be baptized, and that was actually the last time I wore a dress was to his baptism. And I don't want to transition necessarily on hormones. That's just something that I don't feel like I need. That's not necessary for me. But one thing that I absolutely did need to do was to have top surgery. And I kind of got in trouble for wanting that. And there were some like news articles that came out about me being in trouble because I was going to lose my ecclesiastical endorsement, which meant I couldn't continue at BYU. But then I ended up having like health issues. So I dropped out of BYU and had top surgery. And when I went to have it, my bishop said, well, we're not going to pursue church discipline, which was super great. But I also have things that I'm not allowed to do. Not as extensive as Valerie's list. I am trying to get a temple recommend so that I can do baptisms with Toby when he turns 12. I don't know if that's going to work. My bishop like knows my social media, everything. And so I have kind of a lot of followers on Twitter, and he wants me to talk less about the church or be more positive about the church when I do talk about it. So I'm kind of trying to figure out how to do that, but also be honest and to talk about what it's really like to be trans and in the church. But as for me, I live non-binary, basically. I am not sure that I identify as transgender, but I am more transmasculine and non-binary. So I'm kind of in between. And that's just where I am for now. And it's a good place for me to be, but it's also confusing at times. And it can be hard. That's all I got.
Thank you, Kris. Appreciate it. All right, Amber's here. You'd be willing to introduce yourself, Amber? Just tell us a little bit about you.
Okay, so I'm Amber, live in Pendleton, Oregon. It's a little small town in Oregon. I'm 53 years old. I've starting over on my second family. I've got a 9-year-old and a 7-year-old that currently live with me. I've got a 32-year-old son that's in the Army, and that I born and raised in the church, struggled with this all of my life. I mean, ever since I can remember my earliest memories, arguing with my mom that I was a girl, and the arguments usually didn't go too well. Usually I was backhanded or sent to my room, or both, and that's where those went. And about 8 years old, I decided I wasn't going to fight with my mom anymore, but it didn't change the feelings that I had. So just trying to figure out where I fit in constantly, with my family, with my church. They're, I would say, pretty spiritual, pretty well versed in that. And so when I decided to transition at 40, I really didn't tell anyone. I just kind of I'd kind of told my parents, and it kind of went through the family really quick, and everyone just kind of was quiet. So I went to Thailand, had bottom surgery, and that's the only one I've had. But it was like afterwards, I told people that I'd done it, and there were several family members that were like, well, you've gone too far for me. And that's kind of where a lot of it's ended. There are a few that are slowly reaching out, trying, kind of hard between my fears of meeting with them. Maybe they've got some on their own too. It's hard to say. About a year and a half ago, I started coming back to church because my kids were like, we want to know Jesus. We want to have a relationship with Jesus. And when I'm sitting there in my small community, I couldn't find any really affirming and welcoming churches other than the Episcopal Church, and it's quite different than being raised in the church. And so it was hard to go to that one. And so I talked to a friend and I go, Cindy, do you know where I live? And she goes, I think so. And I says, well, whose ward am I in? And she goes, you're in my ward, Amber. And I go, do you think, and she finished my sentence, that there's a place for you in our ward? And she goes, absolutely, I think there is. So I've had a lot of really good support from a lot of the ward members, friends of mine that are in Utah, and Bishop suggested that I tell the bishop I'm coming. And so I made an appointment. He came over here to my house and pretty much said, you're welcome to come. You can't take sacrament. That was basically his only thing, is that I don't believe you're worthy enough to take the sacrament, so you cannot take the sacrament. And I would ask that you not do that. And I'm like, all right, whatever. And so, I started going. I had a few different chats with the bishop. I know the first one was like a week or two after we were first going, and he's going, we believe gender is eternal. And I'm going, okay, maybe it is, but what I got stuck with here isn't what I'm supposed to be. I know that. I've got my own personal revelation that totally tells me it's not, and I can get into that later if there's time and that, but I know this is where I'm supposed to be. He was pretty much had requests that if I needed to use the restroom, that I would make sure that one of the sisters go through and clear the restroom and kind of stand guard. I'm like, I can do that out of respect and stuff like that. I'm allowed to go into Relief Society, and that I still get emails that are the other way, inviting me to all the priesthood things and that. So it's a little bit, I wish that was better. I wish there was a way to switch that so that I wasn't getting invited to the priesthood things. But I am invited to even the Stake Relief Society events. Ward members have been so fantastic. I mean, it seems like every time that I get scared, get overwhelmed by, just my own personal fears, is, we're going, we can all change and we can all be good. And I'm like, are they looking at me, and how much do they want me to change, and I'm not changing? And it's just all in my own head, because nobody's ever come out to me and said, Amber, you need to change. So, but I'll get those fears and I'll feel like, oh, this isn't where I should be going. And then somebody calls me and goes, Amber, you want to ride to church? Or we're having a Relief Society get together and we thought you would enjoy it. And so it's just been really cool that the ward members have totally embraced and accepted me. My daughter's in the process of looking to be baptized, which was kind of interesting when it first started, just because the bishop was kind of like, I don't think I should baptize your daughter until you explain to me how you're going to teach your daughter that families are forever except for yours. And I'm like, I don't have a clue, do you? He goes, no, I don't either. But apparently we never went back to that, so that's probably just, who knows? Maybe it was the last general conference. I know I heard it a lot differently than it appears a lot of church members have heard it. When I heard the last one in October, I was like, I can't believe this. I can't believe this. But since then, family members have been trying to reach out a little bit more to me. And so I'm kind of going, I guess it really doesn't matter how I heard it. It's how everybody else heard it and how they're just continuing to welcome me into the ward. And I'm appreciative of that.
Awesome.
And
thank you.
I think that's a pretty good introduction.
Great. Thank you so much. All right, Valerie, take us away.
Okay, So we wanted to talk about the inclusion and bringing the members to a place where they can include the transgender members within their ward. And we want to do that from two different perspectives, the leadership perspective and the membership perspective. And so I put together a list of things, and then we can elaborate on them as we need to, or you can ask questions. It's things that I found that the leaders can actually do. And one of the things that I went to Affirmation International Conference this year, and one of the things they did there was have a session about leadership and their interaction with LGBTQ. And so I recommend, those sessions got recorded and put out on YouTube. And so I recommend highly that those sessions be watched, especially by the local leaders. And I can tell you that when I put that invitation out on my first Facebook page to please watch these, my Relief Society president did watch those. And she came to me after she'd seen those and realized that she needed to reach out and do everything that she could. But she was good before, but she goes, I realize all the things that I haven't been doing that I could be doing to include you. And she immediately went out and did several things. She put me on all the women's Facebook groups. She said, I'm going to do everything I can within the restrictions that you've been given. You can't come to Relief Society, but you can come to anything else that we're doing. And so she's made a point of being very, very inclusive. And it's been really, really appreciated. Some of the things that she's done, and this was a leadership perspective, first of all, watch the videos. On my first day when I transitioned at church, every one of the leaders came over to me and sat down next to me for a few minutes and offered their support and let them know that, and let me know that they supported me and what was going on, and asked if they could do anything for me, which was very much appreciated. She added me to several of the sisters' Facebook groups, which I'd mentioned. One of the most important things she did, I think, was when it came to ministering. I really did not want to have a set of what would have been home teachers, but now ministering from the brethren. And I really wanted to have ministering sisters. And one of the things that she could do, she can't assign me ministering sisters, but she could assign me a couple, and she did that so that my ministering visitors are a husband and wife, and they've been very good. I also suggest avoid Relief Society and avoid assigning ministering sisters to female to male transgender members, because they're not probably not interested. You can ask them and find out if they want it. Make a point of including them in service opportunities. We do things with our ward, and they make a point of inviting me in, and I volunteer. I've helped cook, I've helped wash and clean, and I'm still on the building cleaning list, those fun things that we get to do. Make a point of calling on your transgender friends in classes. I, for instance, am not allowed to pray, but I am allowed to have discussions within classes. And the previous gospel doctrine teacher and the current gospel doctrine teacher are very good friends of mine, and they make a point. First of all, they've known me for, well, in one case for over 25 years, in the other case since she got into this ward, which is close to 5 or 6. And they've been very good about making certain that I feel completely included in any classroom discussion. And another very important one is the way that meetings are designated. So I'm not allowed to attend Relief Society, but I am, and I don't want to attend priesthood, although I'm not allowed to. But one of the things that often happens is we have fifth Sunday meetings. And I've made a point, since I'm not allowed to attend Relief Society, that if a meeting is identified as being for priesthood and Relief Society combined, then I typically do not go, because it's been identified as for priesthood and Relief Society. But if a meeting is identified as being for all adults, I'm there every time. And I've asked about some of the others, and they are now aware that sometimes I won't show up and they'll want to know why, and I'll say, this is why I'm not there. It was a priesthood and Relief Society meeting. So those are the list of things that, from a leadership perspective, that can be done for any individual member. that I came up with. Some inclusive opportunities, just making a point of letting them know that you support them, letting them know that they're included, doing within whatever limitations may have been placed by the ecclesiastical leaders. I really suggest that you honor those as much as you can. But as my Relief Society president said, there are things I don't need permission to do, and I'm going to do all of them. So, and that was very much appreciated. And that's mine.
Wonderful, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Kris, you're up.
Wait, am I still muted? No, okay.
Sorry. Yep, just unmuted you. Sorry about that.
I was so confused. Okay, the biggest thing for me that my leadership does, some of them, is using my pronouns. I use they, them pronouns, and that can be really confusing for anybody, really. I mean, I'm an English person, English major, and they, them pronouns confused the crap out of me, but I ended up using them anyway. So yeah, like I gave a talk in Sacrament last January, and the second counselor introduced me, and instead of saying Sister Irvin, he called me, he just said, well, we're going to hear from Kris Irvin. And then I can't remember the sentence that he used, but he used they, them as referring to me. And I just about fell over on the stand because I couldn't believe that, first of all, that he even knew my pronouns, and that he would go out of his way to use them. That meant the world to me. So that's my top thing for inclusivity, and it's something super easy. The other thing is, I don't want to be called Sister Irvin, and I don't want to be called Brother Irvin. Just call me Kris. I fought for this name, and I love hearing it, so just call me Kris. And I think that would be good for anybody. You never know. Like when I was in Young Women's in Florida, we were supposed to always call the leader's sister last name. But when we moved back to Utah, we moved to Provo, and I was continuing the sister last name thing. And one of my leaders was like, don't call me Sister Johnson. That's my mother-in-law. And I was like, okay. So I just ask what the person wants to be called. Maybe they want to be sister or brother, or maybe they just want to be their name. I am given opportunity to, I can hold a calling, but I wouldn't feel comfortable if I was called to work with the primary, because I do wear a suit. I would just feel, I don't know, awkward, I guess. So my bishop has not given me a calling, but I'm sure that that's coming. And I just hope that we can work out something that's comfortable for everyone, because I don't want to freak anybody out. I still attend Relief Society. I don't want to go to priesthood. I have no desire. So I go to Relief Society. I do wear my suit. When I go, I always have my backpack with a rainbow pin. I have my pronoun pin. So I'm visibly queer. And that has made a difference for me in that people come up to me and will talk to me. And I've had some visitors to the ward that have come over and sat next to me and afterwards been like, oh, I am, on the queer spectrum too. And I knew that because of how you're dressed and your rainbow stuff, I knew that you were, and I just felt comfortable sitting with you. So that is something I think that anybody could do, especially leaders, is to wear, a little rainbow and kind of show that you're supportive. My local leadership, I really love my bishop, but we do not agree on a lot of things. like I said earlier, I am currently trying to figure out if I will be able to get a temple recommend when it feels like it's kind of like he's holding my social media hostage. So don't do that. That's on the list of don'ts. And I have never actually met one-on-one with my stake president. He's been our stake president for about 18 months, brand new stake. But I believe that all of the difficultness that I've gone through with my bishop regarding top surgery, I believe it's coming from him, but I don't know that for sure. So at this point, I'm kind of intimidated by my stake president, and I'm scared of him, and I don't really want to meet with him. So I don't know like where to go with that. Try not to be intimidating and mean, I guess, is my advice for leaders. Just my bishop, when I asked him if I could wear, pants to church, he was like, yeah, just come in whatever. I don't care what you wear. And I was like, sweet. But I know there are bishops that freak out when other trans people want to wear gender affirming clothing. So just let people wear what they want to wear, as long as they're, not naked. Yeah, my biggest thing, I guess, is just pronouns and being included. I don't mind having ministering sisters, but that's mostly because they bring me cookies. I really like cookies. Yeah, I can't think of anything else.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kris. All right, Amber, I'll try to unmute you here.
I got myself unmuted.
Oh, perfect.
All right. Yeah, as far as for the church leaders, they're trying. At least I feel like they're trying it in mind. We've had some conversations. They've all been very peaceful, calm conversations that we may not agree eye to eye on. I know the bishop and the stake president came out to my house once, and we had these long conversations. They've never told me what I can and can't wear, so yeah, I'm always in dresses or skirts and try to keep them modest. There have been a time or two that I have worn something sleeveless and I'm going, nah, may have been pushing the envelope a little bit, but I'm not wearing temple garments. I'm kind of trying to figure out where I fit in, and so there's a lot of empty spaces there that I don't exactly know. I'm kind of like, yeah, I'm a member, I'm not a member. I'm kind of trying to figure it all out. I think they're trying to figure it all out too, so I'm not in any real big hurry to be given a calling. I've got a lot of very supportive people in the ward, and I love what my ward members they do. They see me walk in by myself without my family, or I didn't come with somebody. There's always people that are wanting to sit with me or say, come here, sit with us, so that I'm not sitting all by myself. And that's huge. I mean, just for ward members, just be as friendly as you can, have conversations, and maybe understand that sometimes when I duck out, it's maybe my comfort level's been reached, and I'm just like, I'm not trying to be short or rude or mean or anything else, but sometimes it's like, okay, I've had enough of this. It's getting better. I am able to stay and talk to people afterwards. I've got people that occasionally stop by or swing by. They'll see me out working in the yard, and whenever I run into anybody in town, we're always polite and talking and how's it going and that. I wish I had different visiting ministers, and that's probably something I'm going to have a conversation with my bishop about very soon. It was like right after I showed up, a couple of brethren volunteered to be my visiting ministers. And one was the previous bishop, and then I think it was the elders quorum president, and that was a year and a half ago, and I haven't seen them. I've never seen them together. I'm not even. I know who one is. I don't know who the other one is, and I'm just gonna ask that I get somebody else. I mean, I've kind of put it out there roundabout, but it hasn't gotten the word. The missionaries were over here teaching my daughter, and they said, "Is there anything we can do?" And I go, "Yeah, ask the bishop if I could get visiting ministers that would at least pretend like they want to be my friend." Maybe that was a poor choice of words, but it's kind of how I feel. And if he asked me flat out, I'm going to say, I just don't feel like they want to. And so that's something that I'm going to ask for one of these days when I get up the courage. But I don't know. We're all trying to figure this out, I think. I mean, it's not a clear instruction part in any, and I've seen some bad things, and I'm seeing good things come. So I'm going to be a lot more hopeful that more good things are coming.
Thank you, Amber. Neca, do you have anything you'd like to add? Maybe tell us who you are and.
So my son Grayson is transgender, and he transitioned almost 9 years ago when he was 16 in the middle of his junior year of high school. And so Grayson's experience is a bit different than some of the other ones we've heard because he transitioned while he was still a youth, right? And our ward wasn't perfect, but they actually did a pretty good job. And 9 years ago, people didn't talk about transgender as much, so there hasn't been much in the press. And so I think, it shows my ward's willingness to be pretty Christ-like, that he was still welcome in a lot of ways. Our stake president did not want him to attend young men's, and so, he went to sacrament meeting at Sunday school and then went home. But he did wear a suit to church every Sunday after he transitioned. And I tell people, the stake conference right before he transitioned, he sat on the choir and sat on the choir seats and sang in the choir in stake conference. And 6 months later, after he transitioned, he sat on the stand in a suit and again sang in the stake choir. I mean, part of that is that Grayson had glorious tenor voice and they were desperately short of tenors. So I think that was a powerful motivation. But I think one of the lessons I learned is that leaders need to find ways for transgender members to participate. Instead of being so focused on, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this, say, what are they welcome to do? What can we invite them to do so that they are engaged and a part of our ward? And for Grayson, a lot of his ability to stay engaged with church was music. But, you need to find different ways for different people. The other thing was that Grayson wanted to keep attending. He wanted to keep going to seminary. And this was the old seminary program. I think the newer lessons are harder for LGBTQ youth. And I wouldn't encourage a parent to pressure their LGBTQ child to continue attending seminary if that's an uncomfortable place for them. But Grayson wanted to keep attending seminary. And so he did, and he graduated from seminary in our stake. And that year, what they did for seminary graduation is they recorded all of the seminary graduates sharing their testimony, and then shared, a video, an edited video of that with all the, people who attended the seminary graduation for our stake. And Grayson was included in that and got to share his testimony. So I just, I think that we were really blessed that Grayson had leaders, including a bishop, who very much wanted him to be there. And that made a huge difference.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Neca. All right. We're going to go back to Valerie. She didn't get a chance to share member stuff. And so go for it, Val.
Okay. So we wanted to talk about things that could be done from the members' perspective, but I want to circle back just quickly because this is a leadership thing. This occurred this last Sunday. Someone posted this in Facebook on one of the private groups. I'm just going to read it. I promise I wouldn't use names. It says, today our high councilman came up to me, who also has a transgender child, F to M, or female to male, just like me, and asked me why I wasn't in priesthood. And he says he knows exactly why I wasn't in priesthood. But he says, I responded that I had been asked not to attend. He responded with words I never thought I would hear in my lifetime. Quote, we would like to invite you to come next week. In fact, we need you to come. We are all imperfect beings, and you being uninvited should never have happened. I'm sorry about that. And that was important for two reasons: for the inclusion, for the acknowledgement of where he needed to be, and for saying I'm sorry, which so very rarely happens within the church. All right.
So beautiful.
So we have this list of things from a member perspective that can be done. Most of these have actually occurred in my ward, and are very appreciated. I'm going to go through the list very quickly and maybe just a quick comment about each. Number one, offer to take notes. When I was told I couldn't be in Relief Society, some of the sisters offered to take notes for Relief Society to give them to me. Invitations to girls' nights out. I've been included by so many members of the ward. We're going to go do this. We're going to a movie. You want to go with us? And nothing but inclusion and appreciation and love. Invitations to their book clubs. I've been invited to those, and those were intimidating, but I loved going to them. I'm doing all these things they invite me to, I'm at. Speak with your transgender members at church. They may want to get in, do what they want to do, which is be there for the purposes of worship, and get out. And if they want to get out, let them. But they also would like to be talked to, just like any other ward member. Have a talk with them. And two things important: listen to their social story. You've heard part of our social stories tonight, and their background in life is very different from most other people's. Also listen to their spiritual story. You'll find amazing spiritual journeys that they've gone through, lots of personal revelation they may have encountered, how they may have felt interacting with the church throughout their lifetime, and how they're interacting with the church now. And then importantly, and I discovered this, is share your experience as an observer. I transitioned in a ward where I had been a member for over 25 years. And so most people knew who I was. And I have learned about some very interesting stories about how the rest of the ward had to deal with my transition. Because when someone transitions in your ward also has to go through a transition. They have to deal with someone who is gone, the old person, and someone who's now there. And some of them can have a difficulty doing that. And they may go through a serious personal crisis themselves. And I've had people discuss things that have happened in their homes, within their marriages, from several families in our ward, that my transition had an effect on their family life in certain ways. So share your experience with a transgender person as an observer. So let them know that you're aware of them and that you understand part of what they're going through. Sit with them or invite them to sit with you at church. That's important. Treat them like any other sister or brother in the ward within the limits imposed by your leadership. Include them in the silly stuff. I've been invited by people, or I've had notes from people on Facebook, from members of my ward, that I would not have expected to contact me. And yet they did, because it was just the silly stuff that was going on. So it's the normal human interaction that's so important. Learn whether or not your transgender member is comfortable discussing their pre-transition life. Some are very, very aversive to that. It can be painful to them. Others are very open. I happen to be in the camp where I am completely open about my previous life. I have a large family, but thankfully, everyone has been accepting of me. I haven't lost any family members, which is always a fear of someone who's transitioning. But not everybody is open about their pre-transition life. So find out what their comfort level is, and if they don't want to talk about it, please, by all means, leave it alone. Watch Latter-gay story videos. You can learn a lot about your other transgender members throughout the church by looking at the videos on the Latter-gay Stories website. I don't know, Kris, I'm not sure if Kris has a video out there. I know I have an interview out there. And there's several others who are obviously not here tonight. Talk to your children. Let them understand what's happening. I've had parents talk to me about the conversations they've had with their children. And some children are instantly and very quickly welcoming and accepting. Others are like, well, I don't know what the heck's going on. And they'll get a different response to any one of them. And I wrote down 2 little things I'd like you to remember. As for a transgender person, love them for who they are, not who you think they should be. And you can't love them for who they are until you find out who they are. So make the effort to find out. And then be willing to give them a shoulder to cry on, an ear for them to confide in, and a friend to share in their joys. You're going to find that a transgender person's life experiences will be different from other people. We've had a discussion about surgeries here, and many transgender people will go through surgeries, some that the church tells them they don't want to do. So are you prepared to be there to help them as a fellow human being and a member when they're going through significant life changes that maybe the church as an institution doesn't approve of, but as your fellow congregant, be there for them just like you would be for any other person who's going through medical issues or life issues or anything like that. Be there and listen to them, be ready to share in their joys and give them a shoulder to cry on and someone you can talk to. That was my list of things that members can do, how they can interact with the transgender members and do things that are important. I want to mention 2 things. Try not to do what's called othering. I, for instance, am in a position where from the perspective of the church, I'm neither male nor female. I'm not allowed to do the male nor the female things, which sometimes can be painful at church, especially when they do things that are segregated into the men and the women. For instance, the Christmas meeting we had this year was an awful meeting for me, because of the way the program was done and the separation of men and women. And that was a sacrament meeting. And Mother's Day was terrible as well. Our church always does for the women a meeting. They tell it it's a Relief Society function. They have all the Relief Society women get together for a dinner at the last hour of church, and all the men take care of all the other classes and things. And not going there was painful. So those are the 2 worst days of my church. But every other part of my church experience this year has been absolutely fantastic. My ward has been very good. As Neca said about her ward, some of them are very Christ-like, very open, very accepting, very willing to reach out and treat you like the human being that you are, even though you may be just a little bit different. That's what I had.
Wonderful. Thank you, Valerie.
Thanks.
All right. I'm going to unmute everybody. So if anyone has a question, feel free to throw it out there, or you can type it to the side. Either way. Just open it up for questions.
I just want to say thank you. Thank you so much for your candor and your openness. You all really just touched my heart, and I appreciate your bravery and your courage and helping us learn what we need to do. Thank you.
This is Sharon. So I appreciate the comments about what members can do. Some of me was kind of wondering about the limitations. I was envisioning comments and things that other members might do if they say, well, these are the things I can do, but it doesn't get at policy. So if we kind of shirk the issues of policy, and if there's any sense, I think, of the if it seems to trans members who are active, if it seems disingenuous, if somebody was to do all they could do, but not to take any issue or to do any advocacy or ask any questions when it comes to the policies of the church, like, is that still accepted? Is that still somebody that you can consider a friend and sit next to in the pew? Or how does that feel towards you when they are completely supportive and unquestioning, and also want to make sure that you feel loved and included?
I mean, I get it. It's an odd line to walk. Some people, I mean, I have friends that support the church 100% and are, all in, but they also support me, and they love me, and they know that I'm trans, and they're accepting, and brought me dinner after my top surgery. So yeah, I mean, it's a weird place. I don't know. What do you think, Valerie?
From my perspective, I don't fight against the policies of the church. Mm-hmm. I walked in, I told them, look, this is what's happening to me. Am I still welcome here? And I'm not going to be an activist and a loud voice. I'm there to be a quiet testimony that there are LGBTQ members amongst you. And so my ward can't deny it. Your ward can't deny it. Every time they hear some message from the church leaders, they know that it actually applies to them because they have visible LGBTQ members within their ward. And that same is probably true in every ward, but there are many closeted people who are afraid to come out and say anything. And so my goal is to be quietly visible. And so consequently, I'm not fighting the policy. So if somebody is not being loudly advocating against the policies of the church, I recognize that when they do that, they are toying with their own salvation as defined by the church as well. And I bear them no hostility for that. The restrictions that I have, my Relief Society president has said she thinks it's ridiculous that I can't be in Relief Society, and she would bring it up. A former bishop who I play tennis with, I played tennis with him every Saturday morning for the last 25 years, and we continued to play even after I transitioned. He said to me, do you think they're ready to let you go to Relief Society now? And I said, no, I don't. And then I explained to him the concept of leadership roulette and how each one of us winds up with a very different experience with our leadership, because there is no set policy or guidelines for transgender members being in church, other than certain restrictions based upon surgeries you may have had. So, and he said, I think the ward has completed their transition too. I can't believe that you would be considered to be a disruption in Relief Society. So they're out there, and they think some of these policies are ridiculous as well. Part of the issue is that there really is no defined policy. Every one of us gets something completely different because the church will not come up with anything. You go look at the church's same-sex attraction web pages, the transgender question is completely unapproached, ignored. They really don't discuss anything with that. So we're kind of in limbo. We know that what's going to happen is different. There's someone 2 states over who I'm told is being subjected to disciplinary counsel and possible excommunication just for wearing women's clothes to church, which is completely different from my perspective, completely different from the young man I read you his story a few minutes ago, and from Kris's perspective, and from Amber's perspective. So it's all over the map. So consequently, I do not complain about anybody's personal relationship with the church. I consider these people to be just as good of friends as anything else. I'm not fighting it. Why should they? So
I kind of intended to be that quiet, visible person too, and then I accidentally became loud. Not on purpose, for sure. I just want to know with leadership roulette, when I was thinking about going on testosterone, my bishop told me that would be considered gender reassignment surgery and could bar me from church stuff. And I thought that was, sorry, just a second. Okay, bye. Bye. Nope, bye. Sorry. Totally go away.
We all have families.
Okay. Anyway, yeah, so he didn't want me to go on testosterone. And it would be considered gender reassignment surgery, which to me is it's a shot. It's not surgery at all. And then it was sort of the same when I had top surgery. I mean, I know it's an actual surgery, but it's not reassigning my gender. It didn't make me a man. It didn't make me transition. So again, it's that leadership roulette it's a fun game to play.
And for instance, I'm close to 18 months on HRT, and they've never even questioned that. So, yeah. And I've told them when I told them I was transitioning, I told them I was doing hormone replacement therapy. So.
Any other questions?
Sharon, did that answer your question, by the way?
Yeah, sorry, it's noisy in my house too, but it did, and thank you for the comments.
You're welcome.
Do you ever feel like that allies go too far? I host a queer family home evening here at my home, and that was brought up a couple meetings ago about sometimes allies make it too much about them. Do you feel like that happens with your ward members? I think in their support, meaning not that they're, I don't know, I've questioned them many times. I don't want to do that. I don't want to be that person.
Yeah.
I think it's important to let queer people advocate for themselves. Yes, there's definitely a time and a place that we need allies and we need their support, but it can't always just be the allies speaking up. So I guess most important is to not talk over queer voices.
Mm. Thank you.
I think everyone who's been, that I could refer to as a true ally or an ally in my board has been very, very genuine and sincere. I don't think anybody has made it about themselves. It's very much about just being a good friend. I had one, one told me the story. It was shortly after I transitioned, and she was talking to someone else in the back of Sunday school, which we had in the gym at the time. And she told me that she said to this other person, because they were discussing the fact that I'd transitioned, and she said, "I think she's brave." And this other person said to her, "Why are you making fun of them by calling them she?" And she said, "Oh, I believe that's what she wants to be called." And she felt so bad about this. She sent me an email after church, and she goes, "This is the conversation that I had. Am I right?" Essentially asking, "Are those your pronouns?" Because I would be mortified if anyone ever thought that I was making fun of you in any way. And the answer, of course, was, "Yeah, you've done exactly what you should have been doing." And I said, there is no way I would ever continue to be anything other than a genuine friend. So I have not seen anybody attempt to go overboard or try to make it about themselves, or I guess the word is try to make them appear to be, what's the common term now, woke, as opposed to just being a good friend. Everybody in my ward, I've had a couple of interesting conversations that were not good, but maybe once and then they go away. So.
Awesome.
Cool.
Last call for questions.
Can I
Well,
share an experience?
Well, I think I said this at our Affirmation Chicago conference to Valerie, but just hearing Chris's story and Amber, I mean, even though you don't try to be heroes and be courageous, you are very much like heroes and courageous. I mean, in my sight. I mean, as someone outside of the church who's left the church to see the bravery that you all deal with, knowing just going to church on Sunday, like, I don't know, it's very inspiring. And maybe you don't try to be inspiring, but it's incredibly inspiring.
I'm trying.
I was really impressed by Valerie's testimony. I'm going to call it a testimony because that's what it was when she gave it at Affirmation Chicago conference. And I follow Kris a lot. And just hearing your words, Amber, before my rabbi called, I mean, you all are really heroes, and you all are really brave, and I can't reiterate that enough. And you're not trying to be brave, you're just trying to be yourself. But by doing that, you are like heroes.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Kris, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, you know, so I had my top surgery in July, and because of all of the fallout that happened last year with possible church discipline and everything, I didn't really feel comfortable asking for help from my ward after the surgery. So I was actually just in one of the Mormon groups I'm in. It's called Exponent, and they put together a meal train for me and brought us dinners for 2 weeks. And you know, at the time, I mean, I'm still super grateful, and I was so grateful then. But looking back, it's like, you know, it's really sad that I didn't feel safe enough to ask for help from my ward members. And I had an infection, so healing took a little bit longer. I ended up in the hospital for a little bit. And I did have my Relief Society president, when she found out, she brought us dinner. But it was one of those things where it's like, well, I need help, but I can't ask for it from the people who are supposed to be like supporting and helping us out. And I mean, it wasn't just me that needed help, it was my husband and my son too. So it's frustrating to look at that and say, that was a missed opportunity for service, for ministering, for putting Christ in for being Christ-like, I guess. But I don't want to end this on a sad note, so sorry.
So this is Sharon. I think I have one more question kind of related to that, and just kind of what's been touched on, I think, a couple of times. Amber mentioned it too in some of the things she said, and all you have really the sense of belonging, and also kind of the impending threat with not knowing regarding, you know, leadership roulette, so to speak, of how they're going to respond if you express certain needs or certain, you know, present yourself in a way that they may or may not be okay with. And I know that even as a member who's not LGBTQ, I can feel like my relationship with the church is somewhat tenuous, and that sense of belonging can be really ambiguous. I mean, I had an experience where I expressed views about LGBTQ things, and immediately I had like 4 leadership people from my stake friend me on Facebook within 24 hours, and I was kind of nervous about that. To your point, Kris, about having your social media surveilled. And so I was wondering if you had just comments about how you, what is the core of what is your sense of belonging, like what roots that, and how tenuous it is in consideration of your standing as an LGBTQ member.
Well, as Valerie was relating, I think it was Valerie, relating the story about the priesthood, the person that was invited to attend priesthood, I kind of sat here and thought, is there really a place for me in this church? And I don't know. I don't know if there is or if there will be. But I'm very stubborn. And I recognize that even if there may not be answers at least I can be a voice and be visible for, especially for the queer youth that need to see that it's possible to be alive and queer and LDS. Because I know when I was growing up, that was something I wasn't sure that could all those things could be. So I don't know. I sometimes I feel like I belong, and sometimes it's like, nope, I really don't. But I'm just gonna hang on anyway.
I'm also very stubborn. Sometimes I've said I'm trying to use the word self-assured now as opposed to arrogant. So, and I know that my relationship with Christ and with the gospel is exactly the same as it was before they found out I transitioned. And somebody started Kris, you probably saw it, an exponent, the let's have a brief testimony meeting online. And one of the things that I put on there was that my entire life I was at church, and I always felt uncomfortable there because I was there as a lie. I was there as playing the role of the guy that I didn't feel comfortable playing. And that gave me, I referred to it as a reverse crisis of faith. And then I transitioned, and now I show up honestly and authentically and as who I am. And it has actually increased my own spirituality, my own understanding of the gospel. And I find it funny that when the church was welcoming and inviting, I had trouble with the gospel, and now that they're hostile towards me, I'm there. And there could be a small component about wanting things that you can't have anymore, but I also know that it's really because I have been able to shed all of the charade that many people may think I'm living the charade now, but I know that I'm not. And being able to get rid of all of those things at the expense of I say this all the time, never confuse the gospel with the institution, and never confuse doctrine with policy. I'm good with the gospel, I'm good with doctrine. The institution has some things I don't like, and there's some policy things I don't like, and I can't do anything about those until other people's minds are changed. So I proceed in my stubbornness and in my self-assuredness, knowing that this is where I belong. And even if I'm excommunicated, which frankly I expect may happen because I'm planning surgical things later this year. But I've already decided that even if excommunicated, I will still be there because I know it's where I'm supposed to be. And I actually know that there are people in the ward who will continue to accept and appreciate me, and they'll understand my situation. So.
Well, thank you so very much to Valerie and Kris and Amber and Neca. I too have been inspired, as I think we all have. So really, really appreciate it. Thank you to everyone who is here. Glad to have you, and look for more posts online. We will be having more of these online gatherings in the future. This has been recorded, so it will be posted on Mormons Building Bridges and probably a couple other places.
I like how you say that after.
Sorry, Kris. If there's anybody who shared who doesn't want it posted, let me know, and privacy stuff will honor those wishes. Sorry.
I'm perfectly good with that. So
right.
I've made a commitment to be out and open and honest, and so yeah, anything I said here tonight you can quote. Or forget, whichever you find more appropriate. Yeah, so.
Awesome. All right. Well, everybody. What was that, Kris?
Say thank you.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Thank you
Thanks
so
for everyone
much.
Attended.
Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful night.
Bye-bye. Thanks.
All right.
Thanks all. Bye.